Bonjour, bonjour. Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you back, and I'm so very excited for this evening's webinar. My name is Dr. Krista Kostroman. I'm the Chief Science Officer here at the DNA Company, and I have the privilege and the pleasure of welcoming one of our most esteemed clinicians here at the DNA Company, who is widely, wonderfully sought after, Dr. Lara Varden. And this evening, we have the delight and the pleasure of talking to you about functional genetics. This is a topic that we get quite often asked about, like, what on earth is it that you guys do? And then separately, what do you mean by functional? How does that change things? So I wonder if we can kick that conversation off. During that time, as we're chit-chatting about what exactly this is, we did toss up some poll questions. Please make sure you answer them. This evening in particular, we're going to dive really deep into the roots of some medical conditions, and we want to know where people are at in regards to some of those. So it's helpful for us to get some of that feedback. So while we're chatting the glory of functional genetics, fill out the poll so we know who you are. Dr. Lara, welcome. Welcome.
Hello, and welcome. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. You're in for a treat, a little bit different way that we're going to be working this evening. Definitely some things to learn. Also diving into a case study, which will be really interesting, that I hope that every single one of you can kind of glean some information from. And, it's really interesting because with the term functional genomics, people have been hearing these buzzwords, it's so cool, but do you really know what that means, what that entails? And, as an educator, I love getting into language, the etymology of the words, which is basically what are the roots, what do these words mean? So I didn't know, would you like me to kick off doing some learning and definitions here?
Yes, ma'am. Let's take you back to school, everyone. Put on
Yeah.
your little learning hat. We'll be here for just a beat. We want to jump into the practical stuff in a second, but I think we hear these questions so often. I think it's helpful that we actually spend about 5 minutes talking about what are functional genes. So when someone comes up to you, Dr. Lara, and says, like, what on earth is it that you do? What is functional genetics? What's your elevator pitch answer? How do you respond to them?
Well, breaking it down, functional, how do things work?
Yeah.
Genomics are genes. Really, that's the most basic description. But when we talk about functional genomics, it is defined as the study of not just the genome itself, which is that collection of all the genetic material in every cell, but it's the products that are made, like RNAs and proteins, these things that are encoded in the DNA. How are they controlled, and how do they interact with one another? Really, I mean, just like what is your function in the world? What do you do? How do you do what you do? But we're looking at the genes. So, and when we're talking about like what we do, it's the application of functional genomics. That is what we do. We leverage the epigenetics, the expression of the genes, to purposefully manipulate the environment in and around us to influence the expression of those genes in our favor. Online, that's what we do.
I love it. I love that. And kind of how do we leverage that? Because I think a lot of the time people say, like, oh, you must study how people get breast cancer or how people get this specific condition. Because for a very long time, most of the energy and effort that went into genetics was looking at when things went wrong versus what I think we're looking at and what the field of functional genetics is looking at is not necessarily how do things go wrong to get you to a disease, but how does your body work? How does it function? How does it pull from DNA to create all those little enzymes and other critters that run your body? And how does it work on the day to day? So how do we work in a wellness way as opposed to what gets us sick? Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. And I would even say into prevention instead of disease.
No, I love that.
Let's
I love
prevent the disease.
yeah.
Let's not wait till we get there.
Yeah. So I wonder if we can ground ourselves, and this is getting into kind of a little bit of a case study that you were referring to. I wonder if we can ground ourselves, because what I hope we can do through our conversation, through our discussions, through your brilliant clinical assessment and care, right? I wonder if we can kind of detail what's a common problem that people bring to their doctors. Right? What's a common problem that a doctor might even highlight to a person of, hey, you're sick, you need to work on this. And I want to really delineate what would be the approach of kind of conventional medicine, that 7-minute visit that you're afforded with your general practitioner, compared to the plan that can be created once we're able to go in even a level deeper and say, here are the genes that are or are not contributing to that, as well as can contribute to the fix, right? Because I think we have to always step away from genes causing a problem, but also genes that can support a fix. Is that fair? Do you like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Love it. All right. So we have a client, Dr. Lara. She walks into your office. Okay. Her name is Veronica Brain. Okay. She's a 42-year-old female, and she has recently seen her GP. And her GP, she has not seen her GP for, let's just say, 5 years. That's pretty common, right? People don't necessarily go to the doctor every year. So this is her first checkup in 5 years. So she got the full gamut of like, let's run the blood work, let's check your blood pressure, let's feel around, let's see how things are going. So she leaves this appointment and the doctor has told her a few things. He's kind of used this phrase of, you have metabolic syndrome, right? There wasn't much time to describe it, but he said, you have metabolic syndrome, which means you have, additional to that, diabetes, high blood pressure, you're overweight, and some things just aren't working in the body. Okay. So I wonder now, like as we go along, I'm going to feed in some lab work measurements. I'm not going to give them all now, but I want you to kind of say, okay, what do you think this doctor, based on kind of this phrasing of metabolic disorder, first of all, what is that? And what do you think this GP, who has 7 minutes, right? We're not going to vilify the GP here. They only have 7 minutes. But what do you think the care plan that this GP would have offered her? Kind of this big statement of metabolic syndrome. What is that? And how do you think the care provider is going to be supporting that?
Well, first of all, for the audience, in case they aren't aware, what is metabolic syndrome? And anytime you hear syndrome, it is generally a collection of different symptoms or diagnoses or labs. And for metabolic syndrome, this includes things like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, too much body fat around the waist, irregular cholesterol levels, things like that. And what ends up happening is having these things can increase your risk, if you don't already have it, for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, these major killers. And so that in a nutshell, and we can unpack that a little bit more as we go.
Yeah.
But generally, I would expect that when you are in that doctor's office, that they will say something like, lose weight, adopt a healthier diet, move more, exercise. If depending on if you drink or smoke, stop smoking, limit your alcohol, and here are some prescriptions. And that would generally entail like metformin, a diuretic, things like that. And that pretty much is as far as it will go. And they'll say, okay, go take care of this. Good luck. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be flippant. It's not like I say that as if they don't care. They do. But again, they only have the 7 minutes, and it is outside of their scope of practice to handhold you on actually how to do this, and which leaves a gap from what your doctor, your primary care physician does, to actually doing it, to saying, well, lose weight. okay, thanks. How do I do that really?
Yeah.
Cut calories, exercise, go to the gym like 3 hours a day. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not quite doing it.
It's like all of the advice that is offered there, right? Like move more, exercise more, eat better, and here's some medication. None of that is wrong, right? And insofar as by and large it's good advice, it's just not specific advice. Yeah.
Right. Because
Yeah.
it's not just about cutting the calories.
Yes.
It's not just about exercising more, because you could exercise too much and end up injuring yourself and then actually sliding backward and making everything worse.
Yeah.
So it's really having a more clear plan on the actionability of losing weight, adopting a healthier diet, moving more. And of
Yeah.
course, that's what we do.
Yeah, yeah. And so I wonder if we can kind of continue this on, and let's pretend this
Okay.
person came into your practice. And so for everyone's awareness, people that enter Dr. Lara's practice, they've already had their genes done. And this, as we go through this, this will prove why this is really important, because that coupled with kind of the clinical intake that Dr. Lara does is really important, because the genes will better inform the specifics of the plan. It takes it from this general, hey, you should probably eat better, to here is how, based on your DNA, based on your blueprint, you can eat better to reduce risk of diabetes, to reduce your blood pressure, to kind of, initially avoid this sort of medication. I used to work in an integrative practice alongside an MD, and we used to co-see patients. So a person would come to us, and this happened to us often, right? With some constellation of metabolic syndrome, high blood sugar. And there is a space that most medical doctors can acknowledge on that first initial point of diagnosis, where it can be entirely managed with diet and lifestyle. Right. It's case dependent. You have to see blood work, et cetera, how far along the road they are. But there's a lot, and most doctors acknowledge that most of this can be managed with appropriate diet and lifestyle. But it's the genes that will get you to how do you get to that point of, right? So we can avoid medication. The goal is ultimately see if we can avoid medication, manage it naturally. So, Dr. Lara, Veronica walks into your practice. Where are you starting, knowing, with metabolic syndrome, there's several different things across, several parameters that are a little bit off with her. Metabolically, she's off. Where are you going to start? Let's kind of arbitrarily pick one in regards to blood pressure. What are you first thinking of? What genes come to mind? How you approaching that?
Okay, for blood pressure, and I want to throw this out there that that so many times is being used as a diagnosis in itself. And the thing is, it's that is a result of upstream issues. And a lot of times it works into stress, whether it is mental, emotional, some sort of physical stress. For example, when I was in a car accident, my blood pressure was very high because of the stress, the physical stress, the pain I was in. It made my blood pressure high. Here's one. When people go to the doctors, and of course, one of the basic things that measurements that the nurses do when they first get there, they take their blood pressure. A lot of times it might be higher just because you're stressed out just being at the doctor's.
White coat syndrome. Yeah.
Exactly. So, there are reasons why blood pressure can be high. It's trying to figure out why. What is the reason? There's so many different reasons. But one of the things I would ask, a lot of questions, is, what stresses? What is your life? What's going on? Tell me about it. And as far as genetically speaking, one of the things that I would look at is in their cardiovascular health, I would be looking at their ACE gene, their NOS gene. How are these genes regulating the endothelial lining, the your cardiovascular ability to dilate, vasodilate or vasoconstrict.
Yeah.
Because high blood pressure is where it is constricting so much. It's the pressure. The pressure of the blood is high.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the conventional kind of quick ways is if you come in with high blood pressure, they don't have time for the stress conversation, which I think is paramount and almost more important to an extent, but they will quickly go into salt because they know if you're consuming a diet that's high in salt, read processed food. We're not talking about salt you sprinkle on your food. If you're eating a diet that's high in restaurant and processed foods, right, you're consuming a lot of salt. And there's specific genotypes, right, that retain more salt. The more salt you retain, the more water you retain, the more blood volume you have, and therefore the higher your blood pressure is, right? And so this gene isn't going to say you are going to get hypertension or not, but it will say, if you come in with this, how wary of salt do we have to be? How much energy and effort should we put into that compared to, maybe you're looking at mood behavior and the propensity the person has towards stress, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's also in breath, watching them. How are they breathing?
Yeah.
Have they ever done any deep breathing? It is amazing how much you can control your blood pressure, your heart rate, so many other factors in your body just through breath. So never underestimate the power of something you do all the time and don't even think about it.
Yeah. All right. So continuing down our happy little metabolic pathway here. This person comes in with, exceptionally high blood sugars. So a lot of people, when they hear high blood sugar and kind of risk of diabetes, they'll think of HbA1c. So this person's HbA1c is 7.1, right? Their blood sugar is fasted, maybe 185. Insulin's not doing any better, maybe fasting insulin sitting at 7. What are you thinking? How are you approaching this? Because often, when the doctor said, here's some metformin and better your diet, by and large, good advice. How would you further refine that based on genes, based on your intake information of them?
Well, I would definitely be diving into their diet and nutrition reports.
Yeah.
I would be looking at genes like their TCF7L2 gene. And that one deals with insulin response and has been associated with a risk for type 2 diabetes. So are they dysregulated? How is that working? Also, their micronutrients. The one associated with insulin would be the solute carrier gene SLC30A, the letter A, and 8, number 8. And that is for a zinc transport that happens in the pancreas to help with insulin production. And if you're dysregulated in that, then you are not producing the insulin as efficiently. So, oh, hey, you want some specificity? Let's make sure that we've got zinc in your diet, or if you have to, do some, supplementation. I mean, there are so many genes to look at because, like I say in, for my clients, genes do not exist in a vacuum. They are players on a team. You can't play the game with just one or two players. You need all of them. And, they all interact. So there are definitely some other genes. But as you had mentioned before, just because there could be some genes that are dysregulated doesn't necessarily mean that that would be a problem or the case. Like if I just looked at someone's genes and, oh, okay, their TCF7L2 is dysregulated, like they have a TT version, okay, which is suboptimal. I can't say, oh, well, they're going to have type 2 diabetes. That's what genetics does. That's that static, disease state. No. There can be a leaning, toward a possibility But this is where the epigenetics, leveraging the information, going, we need to focus on this. And these are things that we can do to make sure that you don't go down that path of diabetes.
Yeah.
So, but honestly, it really is so much more than looking at the genes. I'd be asking her questions. What's your diet like? And not taking, oh, I eat healthy. What does healthy mean?
Yeah.
And this is where I'd have her fill out a food, mood, poop journal.
Love it.
Saying, it's like, no, show me what you're eating.
Yeah.
And then, that can really hone in on where changes can be made. When you're talking about adopting a healthier diet, we have to know where we're starting off at.
Yeah. And I think here is the beauty not only of personalized medicine, but also creating a medicine system where there's more time with the client. Because again, you and I both agree, GPs by and large have great hearts that really truly want to help people. They're just not afforded the time to do that, right? How many GPs have time to sit down and do that food, mood, and poop diary with a client and say like, oh, just based on this, even without your genes, I can see you're eating too much of this and too little of that. Yeah, and so I value that there's kind of like that energy and effort to fully understand where the person is coming from and where the support can be offered there, because I think that right now is missing in medicine, that time and that TLC.
Well, we really want to focus our energies. I mean, our time is precious. Our energy is precious. Let's not waste it. And that goes not just for the practitioner, but for the client.
Yeah.
It's just probably at that point, they've tried so many different things and they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's not your fault. It's not, anything that you possibly knew that you were doing wrong. You just were never taught or given the tools on how to do it.
Yeah.
So, and that really makes a huge difference, is the amount of time we spend with people and getting to know them, so that way we can have more precision with the time, with the energies.
Yeah. So continuing on, Veronica here, the MD has come to her and said your triglycerides are super high. So is your cholesterol, and cholesterol in the sense that the good actors, the HDLs of the world are low, and the bad actors, the LDLs of the world, are pretty high, right? So what are you saying in regards to that when Veronica's there kind of in front of you of like, doctors told me my cholesterol is way too high and they want to put me on this statin, what are you saying there?
Well, here's the thing. I do not personally prefer to jump to statins right away. Depending on the severity of it, it may be something that needs to be used short term initially to kind of get things going. But honestly, I really work into more of a healthy way of doing that first. So thinking of that, it's a matter of, look at the diet. What is going on? Not just the diet, but generally a lot of high cholesterol can also be a reflection of a toxic load. And this is where, for genetics, jumping over to their cardiovascular profile, how sensitive is your endothelial lining? When toxins are present, not just those that we're getting from the outside, from our air, from our water, from, wherever, but also that those metabolites, inflammatory metabolites that we make from inside, like estrogen metabolites, as they're being broken down, can be very inflammatory. Or is she one that is very sensitive? In which case, well, first of all, let's help, protect that.
Yeah.
But also let's look at her toxic exposures.
Yeah.
Let's lower some of those toxic exposures, take the burden down.
Yeah. 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 So you're kind of going a step beyond oh, the cholesterol's high, let's just kind of fix for that and lower it, to the bigger question of A, why, and B, what are the consequences of that? Because both of those, from your perspective, mine too, but from your perspective, need to be considered in kind of this larger plan of, how do we further nuance and specify, eat better, exercise more, and here's some medication.
Right. I mean, there are supplements, some natural herbs and other things that can help. But
Yeah.
again, this is the personalized. I wouldn't just jump to that and throw supplements at them either. I don't necessarily want that to be the first thing. That's kind of a step down from throwing medications at them just to lower the numbers.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, no, I love that.
This is where functional medicine comes from. It is finding out why. Why are you having these problems? Let's stop focusing on the leaves and branches. Let's start looking at down the trunk, look into the roots, look at the soil, the terrain.
Yeah.
And really finding out why, because so many other things will work themselves out downstream when you start cleaning that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even asking some of the very basic questions, like, you talked about your mood, food, and poop diary, right? For cholesterol, I'd want to see the poop as well. That would be so important to me. If you're not pooping enough, you're not pooping at least one good poop a day, your cholesterol is probably going to be sitting on the higher side, because part of that is cleaning out that cholesterol, and part of that is cleaning out the toxic load that can further lend to the body trying to create too much cholesterol to fix all the toxic load that's within. Yeah. So, oh, go ahead. Yeah, it looks like you're going to say something.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, modern medicine and science really has focused so much on cholesterol.
Yes.
And there's way more to it. There are actually other markers that are better indicators for cardiovascular health, like ApoB, and looking at some of these other things. We don't want to just lower the number of, your cholesterol numbers, because we have to realize cholesterol is the base of your sex hormones. If you lower too much, guess what? You're not going to have a lot of. and the fact that it's very important for insulation of neurons and brain health. Cholesterol is part of the integrity of all cellular membranes.
Yeah.
We don't want it super low. That's,
And I find something often, when people, when they go to their doctor and the doctor kind of says this big scary word of metabolic syndrome, or you have diabetes and your blood pressure's too high and. Oftentimes, again, because of this confines of a 7-minute visit, people start chasing lab values. So they're not per se chasing why is the cholesterol high, they're chasing how do I get it down. And the moment they get it down, they're like, great, I'm fine. But to your point, they may not actually be, they may have even created bigger problems because they've stripped away the things that create happy brain, things that create hormone, and hormone creates happiness in general, right? So I see sometimes, unfortunately, people are like, oh, my doctor diagnosed me with high cholesterol and diabetes, 2 years ago. I'm on all the medications, I'm doing the things, but I'm actually more depressed now than I was before. How am I worse now that I'm addressing these sorts of things, right? And again, it's not malintent on the doctor. It's just that these basic things that we're offering have consequences that we're not appreciating in that clinical visit.
well, it's like going back to the metaphor of the tree that I was using. It's like if you go up to a tree and it's got some discolored and, leaves, and it's kind of looking a little sad and sick, you're not going to go up to it and spray paint the leaves green to make it look nice, or cut that branch off. Is that really healing the tree? No. You get an arborist there, the first thing that they'll do, they'll test the soil.
Yeah.
So It's such a great metaphor. It's like, it's so true.
Forewarning to anyone on this, you talk to a functional med doctor, the chances of them using plant analogies are pretty high. I'm just putting it out there. All right. So before we transition into questions and answers, I want to make sure we take even one more step back, right? Because I think with metabolic syndrome, you very eloquently, beautifully talk through what would you consider for blood pressure? What would you consider for sugars? What would you consider for diet? Not an exhaustive, but just kind of a quick sampling within. And I wonder if we could even take a further step back, because I think, as we mentioned with that 7-minute visit, one of the things it falls victim to is becoming myopic to just the problem at hand. Oh, you have high cholesterol. Here's a pill. Let's see what it does in a few months from now, without kind of appreciating the larger picture of maybe it's stress, or maybe they're not pooping, or maybe there's da. What else? So you have access to the person 360, you have beautiful access to their blueprint. If you're taking a step back and not trying to very specifically address these things, but actually addressing the person as a whole and their health picture as a whole, what else are you considering when you kind of create that larger plan for them that is not just specific to let's chase some values?
One of the most foundational things, sleep.
Yep.
Are you sleeping? I mean, like the 3 main things that I evaluate or ask my clients: are you pooping? Are you sleeping? Is your blood sugar regulated? Already covered the other 2. Sleep. That is when your body is repairing. That is, and I'll tell you, I told a client this today, a situation that I was doing a metabolic reset, and of course you weigh yourself every day, and I had weighed myself in the morning. I didn't get very good sleep the night before. I weighed myself and I was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I was so exhausted. I'm like, I got to take a nap. I took an 1.5-hour nap. I woke up. I felt so much better. I felt a little thinner. I'm like, and I'll weigh myself again. I got on the scale. I was 3 pounds lighter.
Oh, yeah.
After an 1.5-hour nap. I'm not making that up. And it's just like, I wouldn't even tell a story unless it really happened. I was like, oh my gosh. And I checked a couple times. And I want people to realize that when you think back, if you've ever done this, staying up late, all-nighters, whatever, eating late, and what do you feel the next morning besides exhausted, bloated, just heavier, as compared to eating your dinner earlier, having at least 3 hours before you go to sleep. You have a really good night's sleep. You wake up energized, refreshed, and you're just like, oh, yeah, I feel good. During the night, we actually, in that repair, we are getting rid of that bloat. We are processing that. And do you know that we actually breathe out fat? In gaseous form, as those fatty acids and everything are being broken down, we actually breathe out a lot of that weight. So, coming back to breath, like I talked about before, very important for that deep breathing. But it's absolutely amazing when you sleep well, and the hormones that are being produced and the processing and the cleaning, that in order for you to lose weight, you've got to be sleeping.
Yeah. I would offer all of these parameters, right, will be beneficially, something close to that. They would be benefited by a good night's sleep, right? Yeah, and even if for no other reason than just the ability for you to approach the day and to approach how are you going to do health forward things. Because when you have not slept well, right, you're kind of grasping for some comfort. And what is most people's comfort, right? It's probably something to do with food and then Netflix, something along those lines, which flies in the face of the advice of eat better and move more. Right. So sleep, if for no other reason, independent of even scrubbing out your body and breathing out some of that fat, right? It for no other reason is going to set you up better to do the work. So it doesn't actually feel like work. It just feels like things I do to feel well. Right. Because I love those questions that you ask people. I think you said you ask about sleep. You ask about what were the other two? Because I had one I wanted to add. What were you ask about?
Are you sleeping? Are you pooping? And is your blood sugar regulated?
I love that. The only one I would add there would be like, are you laughing? Like, are you playful and are you finding some form of joy within the life? But I love that. I love that because I think those are very basic human things that need to be incorporated into a wellness plan, you know? Yeah, yeah. If the body is showing symptoms on blood work of not being well, all those things need to be part of the plan because sleep by and large will. Yeah.
And part of that, I would say to make sure y'all have a lot of vitamin G, gratefulness.
Aw, I
When
like that. I
you
haven't heard that before.
are grateful, it's hard to have anxiety and frustrations and fear. So being grateful can help lower your blood pressure
Yeah.
and,
Mhm.
everything. Absolutely.
I love it. Now I wonder if we transition into some questions here. Does that make sense to you? Is there anything else you wanted to add for our darling little Veronica?
Um, yeah, I mean, it would definitely be a fun journey. And that's something that I'm so glad that you had mentioned about the fun,
Mhm.
because one of the things I talk about, in the first session with someone is that, and I say, I am excited to be on this journey with you. We're going to have some fun
I love
because it
that.
should be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's often, I find, I don't know if you see this in your practice, often the resistance to, the doctor says high blood pressure, da, 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 like these things that you don't want to have. And there's almost a resistance to working towards health for no other reason than they see the healthy habits as this sentence, they'd rather enjoy life and end it a little bit earlier and a little more uncomfortably than kind of adjust because they see healthy habits almost as a sentence. Does that make sense? Like, do you see that
Oh,
sometimes in practice where people are a little bit avoidant of actually
yeah.
doing those healthy sorts of things?
Yeah. And that really works into the mindset to help change the paradigm, that thought that, oh, I have to get healthy. And
Yeah.
oh, I get to get healthy. How much better you will feel when you have more energy, vitality, the zest, the get up and go and do, whatever you want.
Yeah. 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 Because often I would offer as the body is sending up signals of like, oh, my blood sugars are starting to go up and oh, my cholesterol is starting to go up, often very insidiously, so very slowly, almost without someone noticing, right? They're starting to not feel well. Right. And so these are kind of signals, and there's an element of if you adjust it, then it's A, going to be less of an adjustment, but also B, it's not going to get to you to the point where you're motivated because you really don't feel good. Now you kind of got to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when I look at blood work is I look at the functional ranges in there. That's that word again, that optimal ideal range, which is usually much more narrow than the reference ranges, because
Mhm.
I see things and I want to catch things as you may be moving closer. You may not have symptoms of it yet, but we don't even want you for yet to come. We're going to say, oh, okay, this is a little bit outside ideal.
Yeah.
Let's tweak here. Oh, this could be indicative of hypochlorhydria. Well, there's a nice big word. What does that mean? Low stomach acid.
Yeah.
Because maybe you're not digesting your food well enough and not able to absorb the nutrients of the food that you are eating. So, hey, this is something that we can take a look at. And not, so there's using the blood work that you have but also then looking at the genes, like for these nutrients, how genetically are you, for the conversion of, say, vitamin A? Do you not convert beta carotene to retinol very well with the BCMO1 gene? Well, in which case, maybe you might not be absorbing that for two reasons: low stomach acid, and because genetically you don't do a very good job at it. So this is what we can do to help that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different ways that focused energy can go.
I find the biggest victim of kind of those like non-functional ranges, or like those kind of wide laboratory ranges, is vitamin D. So quite often, like, people will come in and their vitamin D will just be at that like kind of cutoff of too low, but it still falls within that range. And their doctor's like, that's great. But you think about what vitamin D contributes, right? We didn't talk about this with our darling little Veronica, but her vitamin D is super low. And when that's low, the body in general can't function properly. It can't create hormone properly. It can't repair properly, can't support immune or mood or any of those things. And so if she made no other change, but she leveraged her genes to understand, how do I best supplement with vitamin D? I would never offer this as a soul care plan alone, but simply just raising that vitamin D would improve parameters in here. That shouldn't be the only thing. But, it's one of those things that kind of a step outside of the office, an awareness that if cholesterol's off, blood sugars are off, there's probably going to be other things off too. And they are part of the solution.
Well, it's like a house, a leaky roof. You've got holes in the roof. Every time it rains, yep, you're going to get, rain in the house. So what you need to do is you need to start plugging those holes. Yeah, you can plug one to give them, the vitamin D, make sure that they, their vitamin A, okay, but there's still other holes that are leaking water. We need to plug all of them. And generally you want to do it when the sun is shining. Not when it's shining.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I think this transitions us very beautifully into our first question here. So Andrew asked the question, and I hear this often, right? Is there a general rule of thumb for bioavailability or absorption of supplements? And he iterates through different forms. So for example, if you're trying to do like take in a zinc, there's many ways that the metal zinc can be bound with something else. And like each of those will have different properties, different supports. He's also asking the question of, should I do this orally, as in it's a pill that I swallow? Should it be sublingual, something I do under my tongue? Should it be IV? Like, of all the options, what are best, right? And so, Andrew, first and foremost, I'd offer, there's going to be a huge personalization element there. But I wonder, Dr. Lara, when people come in and they're like, sky's the limit, I can do whatever you want, what do you think is best? How do you first approach it? Because it's a big question, and a valid and a really good question.
Oh, absolutely. I will say it depends. And the reason I say that is because there are some that are more efficacious doing IV, even though orally they can still be good. But for example, like glutathione, obviously IV is, direct right there, more helpful. There has been conflicting theories and evidence that oral is not as effective. But when we're talking about oral pills or whatever, the liposomal actually is very good when it is encapsulated in that fat. It actually helps to cross over into cells better, because the cells have a lipid bilayer, meaning fat. So the fat going through the fat more easily. So I know that liposomal delivery systems are generally better for absorption. But that's not always available in all things, and it's not always necessary because it can be more expensive. Things like zinc, as Dr. Krista was talking about, there are different forms. Well, which is the best form? Well, you might have to do a little bit of research, but like zinc picolinate, okay? the percent of zinc in there, what it does. But zinc, you can get it into the body, but it needs to get into the cells. So you need a zinc ionophore, something that helps the zinc get into the cells, things like EGCG, quercetin, and then there's some other factors. Not saying that you have to take these in supplemental form. You can get this in food. Green tea has EGCG. Actually, that's, the main ingredient, or the active ingredient in that. So yeah, there's, like I said, there's different ways. You also have to see what's available near you. If you don't like needles, maybe IV is not good for you. But you also have to look at your genes.
Yeah.
Because like I had mentioned with glutathione, your GST genes, maybe taking glutathione is not right for you because you don't have any copy numbers, so.
Well, I wonder if this is the opportunity for me to kind of share with our audience a pilot or a beta program that we currently have going on, in the sense that this is a really big question, I think, as well as question, what supplements do I take and in what form? Just like, hey, I have this medical condition. How do you think functionally I should go about it? Right? We get these questions often. And so we're currently piloting beta testing a program. It's a DNA precision program. And it could not be more personalized to the client. So what we do for this program is we do individual intakes, and we ask the person, what are your goals? Like, why have you come to us? Is it a metabolic? Is it kind of, I'm trying to figure out my supplement regime? Is it, what is the goal? And then, kind of any medical information that you do have surrounding that. And we will custom design a program for you. Because some issues that you come, so if you're coming just simply for vitamin D support, if that's your only goal, do you need a full program that lasts a year? Absolutely not. A session or two, you're probably going to get there just for vitamin D alone, compared to if you come forward, hey, I have metabolic syndrome, and I'm really willing to work on this, and I want to refine my diet, refine my supplements, refine my whatever, that next level of clinical care. That looks like a lot longer of a program, right? And so what we're trying to offer is really meeting people where they're at. Dr. Lara, the first thing you said there, the first thing I said there was, it depends, because there's so much personalizing information. So we're trying to make that level of personalized care, because it is so important, right? And to an extent inaccessible within that GP space, because they can't, right? So right now, if anyone's interested, again, we're not per se advertising this, because it's beta phase. We're trying to understand it and really offer best here. But if you're interested in meeting with us, getting an assessment as to, here's what you want to be working on, here's how long we think it would be, and here's the level of engagement you'll have with the practitioner. Just reach out to us. Let us know your email, and we will offer, the powers that be have already offered that into the chat. It looks like if you'd like to participate in the DNA Precision program, you'd be reaching out to Tracy, who is our CEO, and she will usher you through this. This is very much a passion project. We're really passionate about ensuring people have access to good, wholesome medicine that considers them as a whole, and not just their lab work, not just kind of the chief complaint that they're coming up with. I have diabetes. We don't want to just focus on blood sugar numbers. We want to focus on everything else that's going on there. Yeah, so something just to be mindful of. Again, the email there is ceo@thednacompany.com, and you'll be first touching base with Tracy, who loves to sleep and always answers her emails. So you'll get a quick turnaround on that. All right. Let us continue on in some of these questions. So Dr. Lara, questions I'm seeing both within the Q&A and then sporadically throughout kind of the webinar chat that we have going on is very much, what's the functional approach to sleep, right? What genes are we considering, and how do we approach it on a functional level? Because I think a lot of people within this group kind of mirror North America insofar as they're either not getting enough sleep or the sleep that they're trying to get isn't all that great, right? There's kind of two prongs to that, but let's wrap a little bit about sleep here. So someone, Veronica, she's come in, we know she's metabolic. How are you going to be approaching her around sleep?
Well, first of all, I consider the 4 pillars of sleep in
Mhm.
QQRT: quantity, quality, regularity, and timing. And I
Mhm.
do have to, give kudos and that information that I got from Dr. Matthew Walker. He wrote the book Why We Sleep, and he was just interviewed in a 6-part series with Dr. Andrew Huberman on Huberman Lab. Incredible deep dive into this. So if you're interested and you've got several hours on your hands that you'd like to really learn a lot more, I would highly recommend that. But he talks about these 4 main pillars. And so when I talk to my clients about sleep, I'm like, okay, so how's your quantity? How much sleep are you actually getting? I always ask if they also have a sleep tracker. I love my Aura Ring, but any type of sleep tracker, I like the data, because we can think, oh yeah, I slept fine, and really, maybe your deep sleep, you can't seem to get more than 20 minutes. Okay. REM, let's really take a look. How much are you waking up? What's your heart rate variability? All of these biometrics are very important in health, and how the quality of your sleep, that second cue. So the quantity, how much? Quantity, how good of sleep? This is getting into the deep sleep, starting to tease apart how good is it actually. The regularity, do you go to bed, same time? Do you have the same kind of routine? What's going on? Or are you all over the map? And then timing. Are you working with your particular chronotype? This works into the clock gene. And I noticed one of the questions that was asked about, like, all of the genes, how many are there that are related to sleep? Well, it depends on which part of sleep. That's a huge umbrella. Are you talking about insomnia? Are you talking about mood, type aspects, which is something that I look at. The mood and behavior. How does, some of the genes like BDNF, how are you with that? Are you dysregulated, putting more meaning to things, letting your head spin as you're trying to lay your head down and you can't fall asleep, or that you fall asleep and you wake up and you can't fall back to sleep? There are different genes we can look at. Or, hey, you slept 8 hours, you never woke up, but when you woke up the next morning, you did not feel rested. You're exhausted. To me, that would make me start asking more questions about your environment, your toxic load. Let's take a look at your detox pathways. How impacted are you?
Mhm.
Lots and lots of questions to really
Yeah.
dig in, and having them assess. Walk me through your nighttime routine.
Yeah.
Tell me, what's the temperature of your room? Is it bright? Are you looking at screens right before you go to bed? What? So many different aspects that can impact those 4 pillars of sleep.
Yeah. 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 And I don't offer this as a sales pitch. It's more just a very humble recognition that sleep is impacted by so many different things. It's, very rarely will it come down to you just have genes that are bad for sleep, right? Often it's something environmental and kind of those pillars you just talked us through. And of consequence to that, it is truly sitting with someone and really in a very gentle way examining all of that to understand what can be shifted. And I really offer gentle because I can appreciate, if you're struggling with sleep and there's this element of exhaustion, fatigue, and stress, right? Doing something that sounds so silly as like, let's examine when your last meal is compared to when you go to bed and the temperature of your room. All that sounds way too simple to be a fix, but oftentimes will offer some benefit. So yeah, I think working with a clinician in particular on sleep is helpful because it allows kind of that more gentle inquiry and figuring out what is root cause.
And I'll tell you, even some simple low cost things can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Having a weighted blanket,
Mm.
using mouth tape. That I've had some clients be like, oh my gosh, I didn't think that would make a difference, but holy crap, that really helped,
Yeah.
just amazing.
Mhm.
Even free things like don't eat right before you go to bed. Just shift your eating window.
Mhm.
Again, start plugging all the holes in your roof. And it's
Yeah.
probably going to take more than changing one thing.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 I think with sleep in particular, we overcomplicate it for many people. And that's not to dismiss those with true issues.
Oh,
It's
right.
just to say there's a lot of, to your point, very beautiful, elegant, low cost, low effort things once you've figured it out that can support sleep. Yeah. Yeah. All right. The next question we have here is from Charmaine. They've asked our access for our bodies to get essential minerals so our bodies can produce hormones properly and absorb nutrients, hoping that we could discuss this. So this kind of dives into kind of, I think you alluded to a lot of genes that speak to how do you absorb certain things, but also just the larger role of nutrition, in particular minerals, within the diet. Yeah. What are your first opening discussion comments? Because there wasn't really a question here, but I like the conversation when it comes to minerals because I think it's apt because where we should be getting them from all of our plant friends, unfortunately, based on farming practices, we're not. And so mineral deficiency, at least in my practice, I see that as an underlying, not the sole cause, but an underlying factor in many, many different conditions.
Right. Well, this is where gathering data, their food, mood, poop journal.
Mhm.
What are you eating? Is this giving us a nice spectrum of
Mhm.
those nutrients, those essential nutrients,
Yeah.
or are we having some major holes there? If they have blood work, that also is another piece of the puzzle to say, oh, your folate levels are really low, or, your iron, maybe you're anemic, or some of these other markers that can indicate deficiencies in B6, B9, magnesium, zinc, some of these other things, even diving into a micronutrient test where we're actually looking inside of the cells, because yeah, you can have some of these nutrients floating around the bloodstream and the plasma, but where they're really needed is inside the cell. Well, what if you're not doing a very good job transporting it from the blood inside the cell? So actually looking, SpectraCell has a micronutrient test where it actually is looking inside the cell and saying, okay, so that gives us some actual data. So, looking at that, but then there gets into the fact that we are not what we eat. We are what our gut biome breaks down and allows us to absorb.
Yeah.
They like to
Very.
eat first. If you have parasites, if you have some sort of toxic load, mold, heavy metals, that is going to block the uptake of your nutrients. Like I said, they eat first. So they could be eating, oh, I'm all organic. I'm eating, all this expensive food. I'm eating healthy. Why am I still having such deficiencies? That's where I'd look. Let's do a microbiome test. We have our gut 360 test. We can now take a look. Let's look at the population going on. Oh, you're craving a lot of sugar. Gosh, no wonder you've got high candida, something like that. It's like, again, it is being able to focus the energies. Where are we going to put the time and the focus on what needs to be done? Because the diet, the healthy eating, certain ways of eating may not be appropriate for certain conditions, yet it's still a healthy diet.
Yeah.
You know, you may have some other issues. And then
Yeah.
also taking the puzzle pieces of your genetics.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Andrew, at the top of the hour, asked the question of, IV, oral, what that might be. And I think to your point, based on what the person comes into and based on how we're assessing the gut, will be kind of one of my first differentiators of where do we actually start the person.
right.
Consistent routine IV is very expensive and it's never anything I lead with. But if a person's been sick for a very long time and the gut isn't well, IV can serve so very well because it bypasses everything that you've just articulated, goes right into the blood and can be really helpful. So working with a practitioner to really understand where you're at, because I think to Dr. Lara's point, there's not really a simple, here, take this, that'll cover you. There's a lot more to be said for, well, let's talk about the circumstances of your body and how it can best receive these things so that we get to a point where it's just ideally through diet, right? That's where we ultimately want to get to. Whether
Right.
that's a starting point is a very different question.
Yeah, because if someone's got leaky gut, they're, and they're not absorbing those nutrients, well,
Yeah.
we need to address that. And you need those essential nutrients to heal.
Yeah.
Just like you could have the world's most incredible architect carpenter.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't or she doesn't have those basic building blocks, the wood, the hammer, the nails, guess what? Not going to be building anything. Well, it's the same type of thing. Our bodies, our temples, it is constantly in the state of repair. But
Yeah.
it can't repair if it doesn't have those basic building blocks, those micronutrients, the trace minerals,
Yeah.
the amino acids. But say you're eating the protein, but you've got leaky gut, you're not absorbing it. Well, there are ways and things that we can do to help facilitate using pre-digested amino acids that we can kind of bypass that. But it really is taking a look at, where are you, the client, at when you come to us? What are your needs? What are your goals? Where are you? We are here to listen to you and taking that time to do so, to properly help you to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand we actually have a hand up. And so I'd invite Charmaine, I hope I'm saying your name right. Powers that be, if you want to enable Charmaine to share with us. She had her hand up. And because I've seen her quite a few. I know we just addressed one of her questions and I see her a few times in our question box. So maybe we allow her to chat.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so grateful to be able to ask this question. I'm really desperate for answers and would love to hire you more offline, but a weird thing happened to me February, a year and a half ago, almost a year and a half. I would wake up in the night between 11 and 12, absolutely freezing cold and trembling, like I didn't know what was happening to me. My heart would race, blood pressure go through the roof. I went 3 times by ambulance in a 3-week period. Now I don't panic anymore because I know I'm not going to die. I think that's an automatic response. But this would even happen during the day. And the first time it happened, I was in a health food store and I put myself on the ground and a lady came over that was in line. She happened to be a first aid attendant. She gave me some coconut water and that brought me out of it. So every night for the last almost year and a half, I wake up trembling and freezing cold, like trembling so bad, I don't know if my legs would carry me to the washroom like that. And almost like my jaw is cramping, my heart is cramping like that, like something's going on. I test my blood sugar, it's not low, but coconut water, pure coconut water brings me out of it. And it's abruptly, it's like 10 or 20 minutes later, all of a sudden it just stops. I can feel the furnace getting back up. I'm heated back up and I just absolutely stop. I don't know if it's the calcium in there or it's the phosphorus and the potassium, I should say. Like, I don't know. And then I had an alternative doctor I went to see and he said, I think it's your your sympathetic system. He says, you could try some cannabis products. So I've tried some of those, and I don't like that that is, you know, a remedy. That's a Band-Aid to me. But if I take them between 5 and 7 p.m., sometimes then I don't tremble. It does help. And the witching hour of the kidneys is between 5 and 7. And what sits on top of that is the adrenal glands, fight or flight, right? So, and right before this happened in February, I was caring for a dear friend in the hospital for about 6 weeks, which completely stressed me right out. You know, feeling so bad, didn't know if he was going to make it. And I don't know if that triggered it, but I'm just desperate for answers and would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
I even took out histamine. I just see someone in the chat saying histamine overload. I don't know if that was for me particularly, but yeah, I took out histamines. I took gluten out of the diet and found out I was gluten intolerant. I haven't had gluten even before that test. Yeah, just totally baffled. At that time, I had a little bit high cholesterol. My cholesterol's not high anymore. When I go to a medical clinic, everything is completely normal. Had the thyroid tested at a wellness clinic, the T4, the T3, the antibodies, everything. Just completely baffled what to do.
For my awareness, have you both been worked up from a cardiac, like a heart
Yes.
perspective, as well as a kidney perspective?
Yes. Yep. Kidneys clear, heart's clear. They did 3 times, 3 different doctors, two medical doctors, one of my own, one at the hospital, and a specialist. And
Yeah, and you've kind of worn like a halter or a loop
yep,
for
I
several
did
days
that.
and caught the sleep. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my first thought, just kind of based on all the nuance of this, and I did see, you know, your interest of working with the clinician in the chat, and I don't say this to kind of dismiss it. It's just that the complexity of everything that you've just said, as well as what you've tried, to me, those are very interesting things, because
Yeah.
what you've tried and doesn't work is also very helpful as to what might be going on. And the electrolyte consumption there, the potassium there, kind of the, as well as just kind of that moment to drink in is interesting to me, like what's going on there. But I also think leading up to it, kind of that very stressful event. There's a lot of places to, I won't say play, but a lot of places to work within. But I don't know if we'd serve you by, you know, digging deep here into kind of the
For sure.
torrid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In one of the 3 ambulance rides, the third one, my blood pressure was going through the roof. The ambulance driver saying, "Oh, this machine must be broken. I've never seen it this high," which I thought, oh, don't tell me. And I didn't drink the coconut water. I had it beside me. I thought, I'm just going to let myself tremble. I'm in good hands. I'll get to the hospital and see. And they gave me an IV of their best electrolytes, and that didn't fix me. So then I took the coconut water, and that fixed me. I know they're studying coconuts. Amazing. Yeah, world of coconut. But yeah, it's just anyway.
Yeah. What we're going to do is, if you want to offer us through one of our channels, make sure it's struck so you don't have to share it with everyone. Just let us know your email and we can get in touch and figure out
I
how
did
we-
already. I emailed
Okay.
CEO@dnacompany.com and put my little story in there and asked to, you know, if I can make an appointment.
Wonderful. So I know our CEO is currently monitoring your email. I'll just, throughout the course of this, Tracy, if you haven't gotten that email, let us know just in case there's a typo or something. We just want to make sure we stay in touch.
Excellent.
And
Thank
I
you very much.
wanted to mention, you know, not diving into, you know, the details or recommendations right now, but I wanted to say personally, as a holistic health practitioner, that the mental health side, the calming of the nervous system, the spirituality, you know, moving beyond. You were mentioning about what triggered all this. What was that catalytic episode that, you know, happened right before all of this? I'm very glad that you were aware and were able to figure out and verbalize what it was. But it's also working through that. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. That traumas and, you know, these different happenings in our lives, emotional, psychological, they end up showing up in a physical way. And
Mhm.
sometimes just working through that is very cathartic, is very healing in itself, while also addressing the physiological, these more tangible aspects of diet and sleep and doing these other things. But we should never dismiss or forget about the spiritual, the aspect of our emotions and our thoughts and our hearts. And I'm talking about heart as in the feeling, not just the muscle and blood and everything else of the physical heart. That's part of it. And that's something that I also incorporate in the work that I do with clients, and doing tapping techniques and ways, to work through these traumas, because it's a part of life.
Thanks for that. I really believe that to be true, that I did find out that trauma accumulates, it doesn't just dissipate. And, our subconscious is still there 24/7. Is there some ways that I can help myself through that? Do you offer in your services some suggestions for that?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
Charmaine, I believe, like Dr. Kosterman mentioned, our CEO Tracy is going to be reaching out to you via your email that you shared for more information. So you should be getting something in your inbox shortly to help in this situation. Thank you again for posing your question tonight.
Okay, great. I see Eleanor has posted in the chat. I might be experiencing adrenal crisis. Yeah, I believe so. I had a very busy business for many years, and I was go, 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 and that's probably, caught up with me as well. The perfect storm.
No, and I think diving into that history and that timeline and
Mhm.
and diving into the how'd you get there will be just as important as to the how do we get out of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Of course, of course. All right, we're going to jump back into the questions. Reverend Sophia has quite a multi-pronged question. She's asking after enzymes that are behind eczema or eczema, depending on how you say it, that can be controlled or eliminated. She's asking after a very specific immunoglobulin. And she's also saying, she's mindful chemo sometimes for people who's offered. Is there ivermectin or other agents that we would consider? And so if I'm kind of reading the question correctly, Reverend Sophia is struggling with eczema. I'm not sure if you've been specifically diagnosed with a specific immunoglobulin issue or if you're looking that we can do that. So I would really encourage you to reach out to us, see if we can support with some of the specifics there. Because again, I think this is a little bit of a complex question that we'd need to truly ask more questions. But in regards to eczema in general, Dr. Lara, what's, knowing that we don't do this specific immunoglobulin workup on people genetically, what are your first thoughts when it comes to eczema walking into the clinic?
First, I would ask, when did it start? Again, figuring out that catalyst, what triggered this. A lot of times, it's due to some toxic exposure. I mean, our skin is the largest organ. It's right there, and it tries to release these toxins. And so it can show up as rashes and hives and eczema and all this other stuff. But there's also, it works into diet. A lot. I've worked with a few clients with severe eczema, changing the diet, working through some detox protocols very specific to their needs has helped clear that and, made a huge difference in their lives. So again, doing a thorough intake, asking those questions. I want people to realize that there's only so many ways that our bodies can express things that are going on, things that are wrong. And there can be many upstream reasons, but it'll show up in a rash. It'll show up in high blood pressure. So it is in the curiosity. It is in spending time talking with you, looking at these extensive intake forms and blood work and all this other stuff that we can really tease apart and figure out what is your reason for having eczema, for having that, you know, what components are going on. And your DNA is one of those pieces of the puzzle to solve the conundrum.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think intake too, right? I think someone who's expressed eczema since childhood and kind of, we call it like an atypic picture. The reason and the support behind that is going to be very markedly different than an adult who expresses this later on in life. And so the wholesomeness, the fulsomeness of this, and I would imagine if you're kind of diving down a route where they're suggesting chemo, or like some agent that really acts against the immune system, it's kind of probably a lifelong thing. And so I think really exploring diet and a few other genes that we currently have and will have coming will be helpful. All right, I know that was a little bit of a short answer for you, Reverend, but I hope that was helpful. But please do reach out to us so we can dive down those rabbit holes with you. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so the next question we have is from Barbara. She's saying that high cholesterol may not be from producing too much, which may be she's saying there's going to be instances where a person may not be producing too much, and so statins is kind of make it all worse. It can be from absorbing too much cholesterol, which can be fixed in the diet with more fiber, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what she's getting at, for a really long time, there is this belief that high cholesterol came from just eating foods that were really high in cholesterol. And beautifully, that's been debunked insofar as we know that when you consume cholesterol, the body is not ideal at absorbing that. You know, of dietary cholesterol, you're absorbing maybe 5 to 10% of that. The balance is just not even hitting the body. So your cholesterol is not proportional to dietary cholesterol, right? It's going to be other means, either genetic means, stress means, you know, to your point, not having enough fiber in the diet, right? And this isn't to say go have fun with all the high cholesterol foods, because often those foods are more processed foods, and so they come with other noxious agents, a lot of other fat profiles, a lot of sodium, a lot of sugar, and things that do make it into the body and will indirectly raise your cholesterol. So I would offer, you know, kind of this question of, if you have high cholesterol, the why of the high often is not specific to dietary cholesterol, but instead specific to processed foods, or separately lacking of fiber, lacking of detox, lacking of all these things. And so I think, again, working with a practitioner to understand where your Achilles is going to be really important. Yeah. Dr. Lara, any other kind of additional thoughts or addendums to that?
I think you've covered that very well. I know there's a lot of other questions. I'm just kind of like glancing at them.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we do address. So
yeah.
Thank you for that, that answer. I hope that, you know, helps for the people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think cholesterol, because of medication and a few other things, has just been this thing where people, because there's been so much medicine and so much advertising from doctors of this is exactly what you do, it's hard to kind of keep up with it. And the story's been really muddied over the years.
Yes.
It's a very kind way of saying it, muddied. All right. So we have Janice here, and she's asking about, so she's saying, you know, she's coming, what about people who kind of present with a good weight, present with a good lifestyle, present with, by and large, I would imagine good blood work, right? So the doctor is not, this is not a Veronica situation where the doctor's like, you better change everything. She's saying she is brain fog and fatigue with a strong family history of Alzheimer's. There's really wants to be focusing a bit more on brain health, and looking at what can she do to better support both brain health and avoidance of things like Alzheimer's and dementia from a personalized medicine perspective. If she's coming at us from, I'm doing pretty good, there's nothing wrong per se, I just want to work and optimize. And I'm gonna talk to this Dr. Lara, because she's so very passionate, and I adore this, of kind of dementia and brain health, and like, what do we do for this population that wants to increase their health span, not necessarily the lifespan, but the healthy years they're living.
Precisely. And when we look at Alzheimer's risk, there are some genes that we look at, specifically your ApoE. That has a lot of information research on that. So genetically speaking, that is one of the areas that we look. But again, looking at blood work can give us ideas on if you are moving closer to a particular area, but you feel fine, I eat healthy. But there again, I would ask, you say you eat healthy, tell me what you eat. You say that you exercise, tell me exactly what you're doing. How is your sleep? When we're talking about Alzheimer's, dementia, any type of neurological things, that also directly is affected through gut health. How is your gut health? If you have leaky gut, more than likely you have leaky brain. There's also factors of your sleep, which I had said that in there's been research, and there is information. Actually, Dr. Matthew Walker also talks about this in his book, and they talk about it in the interview, where the tau proteins and beta amyloids and the deposition of these in the brain, that there has been some research that has said, okay, yeah, that may be part of it, but that's not the full story, and there are other things going on. There's also the fact of aluminum. Aluminum is a neurotoxin. Aluminum, we drink out of aluminum cans. We have aluminum foil. There's aluminum in vaccines. There's, all of these different things that we are constantly taking in. But thankfully, it is a little bit easier to remove the aluminum from our body. And there has been research. Dr. Christopher Exley has done a tremendous amount of research in this. He's actually called the Aluminum Man, and has found associations of aluminum deposition in the brain and Alzheimer's and other neurological dementias and things like that. But also a wonderful way that he found that drinking silicon-rich water helps to remove that. So it's not that, there's just one precise thing that causes Alzheimer's. Okay. No, it's usually never just one thing. But sleep is a major factor in cleaning the brain, getting any protein depositions cleaned out, feeling better, feeling rest, feeling clear. There's also the fact of even looking at intermittent fasting or fasting. I know I personally feel very clear and energetic when I do fast. But not everybody is ready for doing fasts.
Or has an appropriate protocol either. I would offer,
Right.
I see a lot of people who are like, I'll just quickly Google it and do the first thing Google says, and then makes themselves sick.
Right. And actually that works into being metabolically flexible, which kind of, circles back to that metabolic syndrome. And the fact is, your body needs fuel to work, to run, to do the things it needs to do. Your brain, okay, your brain actually uses up like 20% of all the ATP in the body, which is the energy currency of the body, okay? And how well do you burn fat for fuel as well as glucose for fuel? Because your brain uses ketones as well, not just glucose. So can you use this fuel? You need that fuel to be able to focus, to be able to function. So there's a lot of different aspects, and I love the work, of so many brilliant scientists and doctors who, look at this. Brednison, Dr. Brednison, he's done a lot of work in this and reversing Alzheimer's. Dr. Daniel Amen, he's got the Amen clinics. He does a lot in brain health. Actually, he wrote a book on it too. And looking at functional MRIs. And, there are so many devices that also help to set the brain waves and helping it to function best. Brain Tap, Saraset, which is a program, but you have to go in. It's actually like an in-house type thing. So there's just so many things now. I know I can go down that rabbit hole. So,
and it's not to shortchange the answer, but here kind of comes in that element of personalized medicine, and that you'd have to work with her to understand what are the specific things, because you could sit here and I imagine you could probably fill a webinar for 5 days of here are different options, but only 2% of those options are going to be appropriate for, an end client. So thank you.
And I do have to say, something that is free and it would only take, a little bit of movement and time, going out in nature, clearing the mind, getting the busyness, lowering your EMF exposure, communing with nature, is so spiritual in a way. It's got so many benefits. Actually, the Japanese have a phrase, Shinrin Yoku, forest bathing. Just taking that moment to clear the mind for health and clarity.
So. You clean your body, you have to clean within the forest as well. And it's in Japan, it's a sincere prescription. When someone walks in with high blood pressure, they are quite literally prescribed to go out into nature at least once or twice a day. Yeah, I love that. I love to your point, I think it's important we offer things that are accessible to everyone. And, even the folk that are in the city, this has been demonstrated that if you go to your little parkettes and you sit beside a tree, because most cities have at least a singular tree, not the same benefit is derived. So don't think just because you're a city dweller like myself, you're exempt from this. Our last question of the evening is from Brenda, and Brenda, it's just going to be a quick answer from us. So she's just asking, she's saying she's a bit of a Veronica clone. Welcome. And she's asking a form of zinc that's appropriate. She's asking around zinc picolinate. It's, I would say we can't offer any prescription here. We can't say this is going to be best for you, because there are sincerely many different options that come into that. Is that a good form? Absolutely. Would I suggest taking it with food? If you're going to take it, absolutely. Zinc without food hurts. So please do that. But I really sincerely do encourage you to work with a provider, because if you are truly a Veronica clone, with all due respect, a zinc tab is not going to fix it. And so I really do encourage working with it. But that form of zinc that you articulated is a lovely one, and it's a good space to start, right? And so to that end, I want to honor that, honor everyone. Thank you so very much for being here with us this evening, and thank you for listening and exploring the Veronicas of the world, and very gently, I'm sure, in parallel, checking in with yourself, and in parallel, understanding where do you identify with Veronica, and where are ways that you can kind of come in and start supporting yourself, not only with what isn't working now, but how do we get you to increase health span so that it doesn't feel like work, so that this is something that is joyfully added to your life, that it's not something scary, like, shoot, I'm going to be losing out on life because some crazy person is telling me to eat vegetables. And I really hope, if you heard the passion and the humanity and the compassion that Dr. Lara approaches us with, and all of us here at the DNA Company. And I mentioned our the new beta offering, right? That we really sit with people and figure out, how can we bring personalized medicine to absolutely everyone. So I hope you hear the passion behind what we want to be doing insofar as supporting all people in their health journey, regardless of their current state of health, regardless their fear of healthcare, and regardless kind of like where they think their levels in education is at. We want to meet you where you're at. Dr. Lara, any beautiful parting wisdom before we let our audience go this evening?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for spending, this hour and a half with us. We really appreciate it. It shows us that you are committed to your health, to your life. Remember that the body that you have, you're the one living in it. Do you want that house, that temple to be rickety or falling apart? Or do you want that carpenter, that master carpenter, to be able to build this strong, beautiful temple for you? And that's putting in that energy, spending time for you, giving back to you so you can then turn around and be the best version of yourself for others. So don't ever feel like, oh, well, I can't do this and I've got so many other things to do. Actually, by not doing this for you, you can't do those other things at your best.
Yeah.
Be your best. Do your best every day from moment to moment, because you are worth it. And we are here to help support you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Krista. Thank you to our wonderful fairies and magicians in the background having all of this run. We really appreciate you.
You're very welcome, doctors. Thank you both very much. Everyone that has emailed me, I am answering you one by one, so please be patient. Thank you all very much. Have a great night, everybody.
A bientôt.